There is something I want you to sit with for a moment before we even get started. Take a breath and ask yourself an honest question. What is at the center of your life right now? Not what you wish was there, not what you think should be there, but what actually, genuinely, functionally sits at the very core of how you make your decisions, how you spend your time, how you measure your worth, and how you define what a good day looks like. Because here's the truth that most of us are dancing around. Whatever sits at the center of your life controls your life. And today, I want to talk to you about what it looks like to make sure that center belongs to God. Not as a religious exercise, not as something you perform on Sunday mornings and then set aside by Monday afternoon, but as a real, daily, living, breathing posture of the heart. This is not about being perfect. It's not about having it all figured out. It's not about mastering some spiritual formula and executing it flawlessly. This is about orientation. It's about where your face is pointed when the wind picks up and the ground shifts beneath your feet. And my prayer is that by the time we're done here today, something in you shifts. Something softens. Something realigns. And you walk away knowing exactly what it means to keep God at the center, and why it changes everything when you do. Let's go there together. Think about a wheel for a moment. Any wheel. A bicycle tire, a wagon wheel, a spinning gear on a watch. The entire wheel moves because of the hub at the center. Everything radiates outward from that central point. If the hub is solid and true, the wheel rolls with precision. If the hub is cracked or off-center, the whole wheel wobbles. Nothing on the outer rim can function properly if what's holding it all together in the middle is compromised. Your life works the same way. You have relationships. You have responsibilities. You have dreams and goals and fears and habits. You have a career, a family, a body that needs tending to, a mind that never seems to fully shut off. All of those things radiate outward, like the spokes on a wheel. And what holds them all together, what gives them stability and direction and purpose, is whatever you've placed at the center. When God is at the center, everything that extends outward from that hub gets touched by His wisdom, His peace, His grace, His perspective. Your relationships get covered, your decisions get guided, your identity gets anchored, your purpose gets clarified, your grief gets held, your joy gets magnified. But when something else takes that center spot, when it's your fear or your ambition or the opinions of other people or the need to be in control or the pursuit of comfort at all costs, the whole wheel begins to wobble. You can feel it. You probably have felt it. That low-grade anxiety that never fully goes away. That restless searching. That sense that no matter how much you accumulate or achieve or experience, something still feels missing. That wobble is not a flaw in you. That wobble is a signal. It's telling you that the center needs to be recalibrated. And I want you to hear this clearly right now, if you'll receive it. You are not too far gone to recalibrate. It doesn't matter how long the center has been off. It doesn't matter how many times you've tried to get it right and felt like you failed. The invitation to put God back at the center is not a one-time offer that expired the last time you stumbled. It is a standing, open, ever-available invitation. Today counts. This moment counts. If something is stirring in you right now, lean into that. That's not coincidence. That's an answer to a prayer you may not have even known you were praying. Now let me be real with you about something, because I think we need to name it directly. Keeping God at the center is not automatic. It's not something that happens passively. It requires intention. It requires daily choice. It requires that you show up again and again and say, not my will, but yours. That's not always easy. There are seasons where keeping God at the center feels like the most natural, beautiful, life-giving thing in the world. Where worship comes easily and gratitude flows freely, and you can feel the hand of God on every moment of your day. And then there are other seasons where it feels like you're white-knuckling your faith just to hold on. Where life has been so loud, so demanding, so painful, that God feels distant and the center feels empty. Where you're going through the motions because that's all you have. Can I tell you something about those seasons? Those seasons are not evidence that God has left. Those seasons are not proof that your faith is weak or that something is wrong with you spiritually. Those seasons are the very terrain where the roots of your faith go deepest. Trees don't grow deep roots in comfortable weather. They grow deep roots in drought, when the roots have to stretch further and further down to find water. And the roots that grow in the hard season, those are the roots that hold you when the storm comes. So if you are in a dry season right now, if worship feels hollow and prayer feels one-sided and you're wondering if any of it is even reaching heaven, I want to encourage you with everything in me. Keep going. Keep showing up. Keep choosing the center even when you cannot feel it. Because the choosing itself is the act of faith. And God honors that. He sees that. He is working in that even when you cannot see how. Let's talk about what it practically looks like to build a life where God is truly at the center. Because I think sometimes we make this more mystical and abstract than it needs to be. It's not about floating on a spiritual cloud all day. It's about the actual, concrete, daily choices that keep your face pointed toward God, even when the world is pulling you in 100 different directions. The first place to look is your mornings. I know we've all heard the morning routine conversation, and I'm not here to guilt you about what time your alarm goes off. But here's what I know to be true. The thing you give your first attention to in the morning sets the tone for everything that follows. Whatever gets your first mental energy has an outsized influence over the rest of your day. If the first thing you do every morning is reach for your phone and absorb the chaos of the world, you will carry that chaos into your day. If the first thing you do is open your mind to anxiety and performance pressure and comparison, you will carry that into every interaction, every decision, every quiet moment you might otherwise have had with God. But when you carve out even a small moment, even 5 minutes, to intentionally begin your day in God's presence, something shifts. Not always dramatically, not always with a feeling of electricity or supernatural revelation. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just you, sitting in the stillness, acknowledging that you belong to something bigger than yourself. And that's enough. The practice of starting your day in God's presence is less about checking a box and more about establishing the posture of your heart before the world gets a chance to set that posture for you. Try it not as a discipline to master, but as an anchor to reach for. A way of saying, before anything else today, you are first. You are my center. I am leaning on you before I lean on anything else. Now let's talk about your thought life. Because here's something I want to address head-on. Keeping God at the center is not just about what you do. It's about where your thoughts live. It's about the interior landscape of your mind. And for many of us, the interior landscape of our minds is a very crowded, very noisy, very unpeaceful place. We rehearse our fears over and over again. We replay old wounds like they just happened yesterday. We script arguments we haven't had yet. We spiral into worst-case scenarios before anything has even gone wrong. We scroll mental loops of self-criticism and doubt, and what if I'm not enough, and what if it all falls apart? When God is truly at the center, the thought life begins to change. Not all at once, not perfectly. But gradually, the interior conversation starts to shift. You begin to bring your fears to God before you spiral in them. You begin to respond to the anxious thought with a practiced, intentional redirect. I trust you. I give this to you. I am not carrying this alone. You start to catch yourself mid-spiral and say, wait, is this where I want my mind to live right now? Or do I want to lift this? And you lift it. Not because you've become immune to fear or doubt or anxiety, but because you've built a habit of where to take those things. Your thought life is not separate from your spiritual life. What you think about, you move toward. Where your mind goes, your heart follows. And when you train your mind to continually bring things back to God, when you build the habit of lifting your thoughts toward heaven, rather than burying them in anxiety, you are literally building the architecture of a life where God is at the center. This is not about toxic positivity. This is not about pretending pain isn't real. You can acknowledge hard things and still choose where your mind ultimately rests. Grief is real. Confusion is real. Disappointment is real. But where you take those real things, that's where your center reveals itself. Take a breath right now. If your mind has been carrying something heavy, I want to invite you to just mentally set it down for a moment. Not to ignore it. Not to pretend it isn't there. But just for this moment, to unclench your grip around it and let God have it. You can pick it back up later if you need to. But practice the release. Practice the posture of open hands rather than white-knuckled fists. This is what it means to keep God at the center. It's not the absence of hard things. It's the presence of God in the middle of the hard things. I want to talk about relationships now, because I've noticed something that I think a lot of us do, and it's one of the subtlest ways we accidentally displace God from the center. We put people there instead, not maliciously, not with bad intent. In fact, we often do it out of deep love. We make a person our entire world, our source of peace, our primary identity, our reason for getting up in the morning. We pour everything we have into being loved and accepted and chosen by another human being. And then we wonder why we feel so fragile, so devastated when that relationship disappoints us or changes or ends. When a person sits at your center, every shift in the relationship becomes a seismic event. Their bad day becomes your crisis. Their approval becomes your oxygen. Their absence becomes your undoing. And the unfair thing is that we are placing a weight on another human being that they were never designed to carry. No person, no matter how wonderful, how faithful, how loving, was built to be your God. And when God is truly at the center, your relationships actually become freer and more beautiful because of it. You stop desperately needing something from the other person that only God can give. You stop demanding that they complete you, because you are already whole in Him. You can love deeply without grasping. You can serve generously without scorekeeping. You can extend forgiveness, not because the other person has earned it, but because you've been forgiven and you know what it cost. This is not about being emotionally distant or self-sufficient in a cold way. This is about being rooted so deeply in God's love that your love for people overflows rather than depletes. You give from abundance rather than from scarcity, and that changes the entire texture of every relationship you're in. Are you giving from abundance or from scarcity today? If your peace is contingent on how a specific person treats you, if your sense of worth rises and falls with someone's approval or attention, I want to lovingly challenge you to examine where your center actually is, not as a condemnation, but as an invitation to bring that need back to God, and let Him be the one who fills it first. Let's talk about the seasons of waiting, because I think this is where more people lose their center than perhaps anywhere else. When life is moving and doors are opening and prayers are being answered in visible, tangible, exciting ways, keeping God at the center feels almost easy. Gratitude flows. Faith feels strong. You can see His hand everywhere. But then the waiting comes. You've prayed, you've believed, you've done everything you know to do. And the answer hasn't come. The door hasn't opened. The healing hasn't happened. The breakthrough is somewhere out ahead of you, but you cannot see it, and you cannot feel how close it is. And the waiting is stretching on longer than you thought it would. This is where the center gets tested. This is where it becomes clear whether God is truly at your center, or whether what's really at your center is the outcome you want. Because if the outcome is at your center, and the outcome is delayed, the center becomes empty. And despair fills the space. But if God is at the center, then the waiting, as hard as it is, does not empty you. Because the center is still full. God is still there. His purposes are still in motion. His timing has not expired. And the waiting itself becomes sacred ground. There is something that gets built in you during the wait that can only be built during the wait. A depth of trust that only comes from trusting when you cannot see. A root system that only grows when you're reaching for water that isn't immediately visible. A knowing of God that only comes from the long walk through the wilderness, not from the quick sprint through easy terrain. I don't say this to minimize how hard the waiting is. I say it because I want you to understand what the waiting is for. It is not punishment. It is not evidence that God has forgotten you. It is preparation. It is formation. It is the slow, patient work of building someone who can hold what God is about to entrust to them. Trust the wait. Not blindly, not passively, but actively, by continuing to show up, by continuing to choose God at the center, even when the evidence you want hasn't arrived yet, by continuing to praise even when you don't understand. That kind of faith moves mountains. That kind of faith writes the stories that inspire generations. If you are in a season of waiting right now, I want to speak directly to you. You are not forgotten. You have not been overlooked. Your prayers have been heard. The work is happening, even in the silence. Hold your center. Keep your face toward God. The breakthrough is not the point. The formation is the point. And you are being formed into something beautiful. Now I want to address something that can subtly pull the center away from God even in people who genuinely love Him. And that is the idol of productivity and achievement. There is a version of keeping God at the center that looks from the outside like religious devotion, but is actually performance-driven and self-centered at its core. It's the version where you pray hard, work hard, stay busy in God's name, check all the right boxes. But underneath it all, what you're really after is evidence that you are good enough, worthy enough, doing enough. That if you perform at a high enough level, God will be pleased with you and bless you, and you'll finally be able to rest. That's not keeping God at the center. That's using God-related activity to manage your own anxiety about worth and approval. And I want to tell you something that might be the most liberating truth you encounter today. You do not have to earn your place at the center. You were placed there. You were chosen. You were loved before you did anything to deserve it, and you are still loved on the days when you feel like you've done everything wrong. Keeping God at the center is not primarily about what you do for Him. It's about receiving what He has already done and responding to that from a place of gratitude and love, not performance and fear. The difference in posture is everything. When you operate from a place of performance, your relationship with God is transactional. You give, and you expect something in return. When the return doesn't come on your timeline, resentment builds. When you feel like you've held up your end and God hasn't held up His, the center starts to erode. But when you operate from a place of love and gratitude, when you give because He first gave to you, when you serve because you are overwhelmed by how He has served you, when you worship because your heart is full of awe and not because you're trying to move the needle on divine favor, the center is stable. It doesn't depend on outcomes. It doesn't waver with circumstances. It is rooted in something that cannot be taken away. Rest in that for a moment. You don't have to earn this. You already have it. The invitation is just to receive it, and to let that be the foundation of everything else you do. Let's talk about what happens in your life when God is genuinely at the center. Because I want to paint a picture for you that's tangible, not just theoretical. When God is at the center, you develop a different relationship with fear. Fear doesn't disappear. You are still human, but fear no longer has the final word. When something frightens you, you still feel it. You acknowledge it. You take it seriously. But then you bring it to God and you say, I see this, and I choose not to let it lead. The center holds, and fear takes its proper place as information rather than instruction. When God is at the center, your identity becomes unshakable. You are no longer at the mercy of what people think about you. Criticism might sting, but it doesn't define you. Rejection might hurt, but it doesn't erase you. Because your identity is not sourced in what others see or say. It's rooted in what God says. And what God says about you has not changed and will not change based on your worst day, your biggest mistake, or the opinion of someone who doesn't know your whole story. When God is at the center, you are able to forgive in ways that don't make logical sense. You can release people who hurt you, not because what they did was okay, but because you've been freed from the burden of being the one who keeps score. You can let go not because you're weak, but because holding on isn't worth the cost of your peace and your center. When God is at the center, your generosity flows freely. Because you're not operating from scarcity. You're not hoarding your time, your resources, your love, your attention, because you're afraid there won't be enough. You give because you trust the source is inexhaustible. You give because when you've been loved the way God loves, you cannot help but extend that outward. When God is at the center, your peace is not circumstantial. Hard things are still hard, loss is still loss, pain is still real, but you carry a deep, quiet, sustaining peace that sits underneath all of it, like the ocean floor that stays still while the surface churns. You are not immune to the storm, but you are anchored beneath it. This is what's available to you, not as a perfect one-time achievement, but as a daily reality that grows stronger the more you choose it. Here is what I want you to do with everything we've talked about today. Not because I'm asking you to build a 5-step plan or join a program or fundamentally overhaul your life overnight, but because small, consistent choices are how the center gets built and maintained. I want you to identify one place in your life right now where God has been quietly waiting to take the center seat and something else has been sitting there instead. One relationship, one fear, one habit, one area of striving or performance or grasping, and I want you to take it to God today, not with a perfectly worded prayer, not with some elaborate spiritual ceremony, just with honesty, just with, I see it, God, I'm giving you this, come take the center here. That moment of honest surrender is not small. It is, in fact, one of the most powerful things you can do, because the moment you open the door, He walks through it. He doesn't wait for you to clean up before He comes in. He comes in, and then He helps you clean. You were made for this. You were made for the kind of deep-rooted, centered life that only comes from keeping God at the core of everything. It's what you've been searching for every time you looked in the wrong places. It's what you've been reaching for every time the temporary things left you empty. It's the very thing that was missing in the seasons that felt the most lost. It's not too late to choose it. It was never too late. If you've been waiting for permission to let go of what's been sitting at your center and trust God with the space, this is it. This is your permission. This is your invitation. This is the moment. Keep God at the center, not just when it's easy, not just when the circumstances cooperate, not just when the feelings are strong and the faith is fresh and the answers come quickly. Keep God at the center when it costs you something, when it requires you to trust what you cannot see, when every circumstance is screaming that you should take matters into your own hands, when the people around you think you should be further along by now, when your own voice whispers that maybe this time God isn't coming through. Keep him there. Because the center that holds, the center that doesn't move, doesn't empty, doesn't fail, the center that gives you peace in the storm and hope in the wilderness and joy that doesn't depend on your circumstances being perfect, that center belongs to God. And when you give it to him, truly, daily, intentionally give it to him, everything changes. Everything. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If this message meant something to you, I want to encourage you to share it with someone who needs it. Leave a comment. Let me know what resonated. Let's keep building this community together, one centered heart at a time. I love you. God loves you even more. And I'll see you in the next one.